Okay, this video will cover a workaround on some of the issues that have occurred for an assignment for a hacked box where the virtual machine won't run in some of the students' VMware. So what I did is that I created a forensics image of the hard drive within the VMware. And the way I did that was using Netcat and DD. So essentially what you see up here is I have two running machines. As you see in this one, what I've done is I've gone to, let me move this around a bit. I've gone to settings, and this was again the hacked virtual machine, and it's actually an Ubuntu server. So if it's an Ubuntu server, it doesn't come with the default graphical user interface. So obviously I've done something here, and what I did is I associated with the CD drive, something down here, I associated a Linux Mint 9 with it, and then what I did is when I powered it up, and no, it's not going to show here, but when I powered it up, I powered on to BIOS. When the post test ran, I got into the BIOS and I changed it so the CD drive, which had the Linux bootable CD in it, to boot up into what you see here. And you can see there's a lot of commands. So what I had to do was to make sure that the two VMs were on the same network. You see here, .49.136, .49.128. And then what I did was I used, well, first of all, and again this is in the bootable CD, I ran fdisk and determined that the device was SDA, and notice that it has three partitions. It has a primary partition, a logical partition, and an extended partition, but I want to grab all of SDA. On the other side, this is going to be the receiving Linux. And actually what I had to do, because I didn't have a hard drive large enough to hold the 4 GB image, is that I had to go up to settings in here and I had to create another hard drive. And I'm skipping some things in here. Let me make sure I go back and cover everything. So I went to add hard disk, create a new virtual disk, and I selected the defaults on here, and I made this 10 gigabytes. Allocate all disk space now and store virtual disk as a single file. Yeah, I don't want to do that. And what that did is that created SDC down here. Now SDC was not partitioned and it was not formatted, and so it just showed up as dev SDC down here. And so what I had to do was I had to go in and use fdisk and then dev SDC, and I darn sure don't want to go back and redo this. But what I had to do was I had to create a partition, and I'll just show you the commands to do this. Notice the N to add a new partition, and then I had to change the partition system's ID to 83 so it was Linux, and once I did that I could write that out to disk. Let me quit this because I certainly don't want to do that again, so I typed Q without saving, and then I typed sudo mkfs ext3 and then dev sdc1, which would then format the partition. Obviously I'm not going to do that again, or I'll write over everything. And then I mounted the partition on a directory I had called evidence. I guess I made it an ext2 instead of an ext3. I then had to go in, and because I did all that as root, evidence, which is this directory, the current working directory, the owner was root. Notice it's lost and found as root. So I went in and chain node PC evidence, and so that changed the owner and group to PC, which is me, so you can do that yourself. And then on this side, I recall over here what I'm doing is, well, let's jump back over here. So we know that we want to capture SDA, and this is the actual command I ran right here. Let's just look at that. And at that point in time, I've rebooted Mint a couple of times, so that IP has changed. But sudo dd input file equals dev SDA, so I'm capturing the entire image and piping that to netcat 192.168.49.135 on port 8888, and I'm going to wait 3. And over here, I ran netcat listen 8888, and then I output that to sda.zip, excuse me, dd. So I hit this first, hit enter, so it was listening. Not going to do that again. Went back over here, and I typed out this command, and it took approximately 5 minutes to capture all the information from dev SDA and put it over in this directory, which is evidence. So you all really don't need to do all that. I did that for you, but that's just showing you how you can capture an entire hard drive, in this case a virtual hard drive, over a network, which is something we've done before, but that just underscores that this is some useful information. Okay, the original intent of this was for you to open up the paused virtual machine, and you all are having some trouble with that. So I went back and I halted the machine, and I uploaded that into my Dropbox so you can check and see if that works for you. If it doesn't, this will definitely work. Unfortunately, because it's just an image, there's not going to be anything in the physical memory, so you won't be able to take a look at that, and also everything in the sudo file system under the proc directory, you won't be able to get it the running state of the system. You'll be, if you were able to open up, it's the running state of the system now, not as it was when it was originally hacked. So you'll just need to look for the information and evidence located in the files on the hard drive. So as it turns out, when I originally installed this over here, the Ubuntu server, I ran with some of the defaults. So it created a single primary partition, then it created a logical partition 2, and then within that, or extended partition rather, it created an extended partition 2, and then it created a logical partition 5 underneath that. So what we need to do is to mount that first partition under this DD. So how did I do that? Well, first I need to know some information about where the partition starts, and the way I can do that, since we're going to be doing a logical analysis, not a physical analysis, so I need to find out some information about where the primary partition starts. And the way I did this, there's several ways to do it. I did it several ways just to make sure that it all worked. But what I would suggest you do is that you install this program called DiskType. And what that does is it reads the partition information and provides you a lot of information on the start, the number of partitions, the type of partitions, and the start of the partition. So I installed DiskType, and then you can run DiskType on the DD. It tells you how large it is, the type of partition map it has, the number of partitions. Notice this got partition 1, the type of file system, the UUID, where it was last mounted, which was on root, and the size of the partition. Notice here we're going to have a second partition. Notice that it says it's an extended partition. The first partition was a Linux partition. And then within the extended partition we have a Linux swap file. I'm not going to require or suggest that you work with the swap file. One thing, since it doesn't have a file system on it, is that you can't mount it. So the only thing you can do is run a physical analysis on that, but that's not what this is all about. So what I'm going to show you is how to take this information from disk type, specifically this information right here, 2048, and to mount the primary partition so you can go to town and take a look at all the evidence on the drive. Okay, as it turns out, this is the number of this is the starting sector that we're working with. Well, each sector is 512 bytes. So if we go over here and type 2048 times 512, this tells us the starting the start of the primary partition. And then what we can do is, let me go back and look at my, well, let's just do this from scratch. So we'll sudo mount -t, and I think that was an ext3 file, and we want to mount it with the options loop, read only, and then the offset that we used over here. So let's see if that'll, I'm not sure if that's going to stay on the screen. It will if I put it on my second display. 1048576. Is that right? Yes. And then we want compact.sda.dd, and then I just created a directory called foo that's somewhere to mount it. And we hit enter and it should mount. And I believe that was actually, if we run file on this too, you can find out more information on that. So it tells us the partition type. Notice an 83 indicating Linux. The starting sector is 2048, so you could grab that information from there as well. And then it tells us about the second partition and where that starts, which would be the extended partition. But notice it doesn't say anything about the fifth partition, which is within the extended partition. And it turns out this is an ext4 file system I had on there. So if we have sudo mount t ext4, and then with the options read only, loop, since it's an image, and then the offset equal to 1048576. And then I just created a scratch directory called foo, and we hit enter. Notice over here foo came up, so we can click on that, or we can just go to foo. And there is the first partition mounted in foo. If you really wanted to extract the swap file, you could use the information that we saw previously on the starting sector. Oh, let's get out of that. Well, first let's go in here and look in home, and you see all the users there. And a lot of good information in there for you to take a look at. And so if you want to use disk type, again, if you really wanted the swap file, you could use DD to go in and start here and to extract the swap file, and then you could take a look at that with a hex editor, excuse me, a hex viewer if you wanted to, but I'm not going to suggest you do that. It's going to take enough time to look at this in a logical format. And I know this is getting near the end of the semester, so I want you to have a good Thanksgiving. Anyway, so that's the roundabout way I solve this problem. If you can get this to work in VMware with the halted VM, I would suggest go ahead and doing that. Or you could go ahead, because that's more of an incident response, like assignment. However, if it doesn't work, you can always get in there and look at the logical information that is displayed mounted in your secondary VM. And of course, if your VM isn't large enough, see how big this is, it's quite large, so you might need to make a secondary hard drive on which to hold your DD.